Segundo día de la cuarta conferencia de la Red de Economía, la Innovación y el Emprendimiento de América Latina y el Caribe, RIE. Luego del desarrollo de la sesión contributiva, continuamos con el orden del día. Recuerden que las conferencias principales que se realicen en la sala general tendrán traducción simultánea. Para acceder, solo deben hacer clic en el icono que encuentran en la parte inferior izquierda, el mundo. Invitamos al doctor Roberto Álvarez, director de la Escuela de Economía y Administración y profesor titular del Departamento de Economía de la Universidad de Chile, quien será el moderador de nuestra siguiente conferencia, titulada Cómo diseñar intervenciones eficaces de extensión e innovación tecnológica. No olviden hacer sus interacciones en Twitter con el hashtag #RIEConference 2020. Adelante, doctor Roberto.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Primero que todo, agradecer a los organizadores de la conferencia por invitarme a moderar esta parte de la conferencia y especialmente porque tengo una larga trayectoria profesional junto a Gustavo, que ha sido uno de los pioneros en la investigación y en el análisis cuantitativo de estos temas en América Latina, partiendo por Chile, donde nos conocimos hace un montón de años, que ya ni voy a decir, y por lo tanto es un doble placer tener la posibilidad de presentar a mi amigo Gustavo y también con quien he coautoreado algunos ciertos papers en su prolífica trayectoria, no solo como especialista en la división de competitividad del Banco Interamericano del Desarrollo, como lo hace ahora, sino que también sirviendo como Senior Program Officer en el Centro de Investigaciones para el Desarrollo Internacional de Canadá. Gustavo tiene un doctorado en Ciencia y Estudios de Política Tecnológica de la Universidad de Sussex, SPRU. Tiene un máster en Desarrollo Económico y Comercio Internacional desde la Escuela de Economía y Negocios de la Universidad de Chile y un bachelor en Economía desde la Universidad Nacional de Córdoba en Argentina. Sus intereses, que son bastante amplios, incluyen desarrollo industrial, cambio tecnológico, estructura industrial y desarrollo de la firma y administración de la evaluación de las políticas de tecnología, especialmente en países en desarrollo. Gustavo, junto con José Miguel Benavente, fueron pioneros en Chile de las encuestas de innovación y tiene una larga experiencia en el desarrollo, la implementación y el análisis de estas encuestas que han sido también realizadas en otros países y en los cuales ellos han tenido también una participación bastante amplia. Así que los dejo con Gustavo y su presentación. Es un honor presentarlo y es un honor también escuchar a alguien de tan dilatada experiencia que nos cuente acerca del impacto y la implementación de estas políticas de desarrollo tecnológico que han tenido efectos variados a través de las distintas economías, y vamos a aprender un montón respecto de esta experiencia dilatada que tiene Gustavo en estos temas. Así que adelante, Gustavo, un honor y un placer presentarte.
Muchas gracias, Roberto. Gracias por la presentación y los recuerdos de hace muchos años. Let me share the screen first. So, can you see the screen? Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. What I'm going to show now is a work in progress. It's a summary of a book chapter that we are preparing for a book that the bank is going to publish early next year, which is an overview of what we have learned from impact evaluations of public policy instruments in the different areas where the bank has been active over the last, I would say, 15 years. There is one particular chapter on what we call productive development policies. Within that chapter, there are a couple of sections on innovation, entrepreneurship, cluster development policies, and technology extension. The focus of this presentation here is on what we have learned from the vast number of impact evaluations that we have done in the area of business innovation and technology extension interventions. Let's start by talking about the innovation landscape in the region. Whenever you talk about innovation, you have a problem, and the problem is that the concept of innovation is very subjective. Everyone has its own understanding of what innovation is. So the best way to start talking about innovation is by setting a standard, setting a definition of what we're going to understand by innovation, at least during this presentation. And the standard is the OECD Oslo Manual. It is the implementation of a new or significantly improved product, process, service, or organizational model. And why this is important? And it is important because it explains a substantial share of productivity growth, both in developed countries like the US, but also in catching up economies like Finland, South Korea, or Israel. For example, if you talk about the US TFP growth over the post-war period, R&D and ICTs explain something about 2/3 of US total factor productivity growth. However, despite the importance of the investment in innovation across the world, in particular in developed countries, Latin America is a region that still invests very little in innovation. If we look at R&D, which is not a total innovation expenditure, it's a fraction of innovation expenditure, but it's a fraction that is measured and computed in very comparative way across different countries, we see that Latin America basically at the bottom part of the table. And within that bottom part, Colombia is particular in the far bottom part. So we have a massive investment gap, at least in what we call R&D. So it looks like, because we had so important gap in terms of investment and innovation, that we need some sort of innovation policies. However, one thing that we have concluded at the bank is that an investment gap does not justify by itself a policy intervention. This is what normally policymakers do. Okay, they see a gap, they intervene. But this is not necessary. It might be a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition to justify an innovation policy, because the gap could simply be a symptom about the lack of innovation opportunities in each context. So in order to justify a policy, we not only have to measure a gap. We have measured the gap, we know that there is a gap, but also we need to have an idea about if there are enough innovation opportunities in Latin America, and opportunities that are not grabbed by the economic actors. And to answer that question, we need to answer another question, which is, what we really know about the returns of innovation in Latin America? In fact, we know very little about the returns of innovation in Latin America, but there are some few studies. And the few studies that there are, by the way, we are actually working in the bank in a new project trying to understand and trying to measure better the social returns to innovation in Latin America, but this is still work in progress. But one of the previous studies, for example, is one done by a friend of us, Claudio Bravo, that shows that social returns to innovation in the region are not small, okay, are not low, in fact, are quite high, about 80%. So it's a massive return in comparison with any other type of investment. That leads me to another question then, which is why the market is not working, why there are not sufficient incentives or economic actors investing to take advantage of this huge return that at least these previous estimates are showing us. Well, and the reason is because maybe the social return can be high, but the private return, which is the one that leads the reaction of economic actors, is the problem. Social returns can be high, but private returns can be very low. So government intervention can be beneficial if profit-driven actors underinvest from a social welfare perspective. And the reasons for the low investment are low returns. And low returns can be justified due to, first, low appropriability of knowledge investment. Knowledge has been regarded as a non-rival and non-excludable good, and then first rival may be able to free write on its investments. Not all knowledge enjoys the properties of public good with the same intensity. This is important because we tend to assume that knowledge is the same, and this knowledge is not the same. There are many different types of knowledges, and these different types of knowledges have different characteristics in terms of being non-rival or non-excludable good. For example, more generic the knowledge being generated and more collaborative the knowledge production process, more spillovers could be expected. So that's the reason why the key focus of IDB intervention in the field has been evolving towards supporting individual firms, towards the support of consortia of firms, of clusters of firms that collaborate within them and public research organizations, because we know that through this collaboration is where the knowledge leakages or spillovers are produced. The second problem why there is an investment gap is a problem of information asymmetries. So innovation projects are different from ordinary investment in several ways. First, the returns to innovation investment are more uncertain and involve longer gestation lags. Second, innovators may be reluctant to disclose detailed information about the projects because precisely they spillovers. And third, innovation investment normally include a large proportion of intangible assets, such as human capital, that have very limited use as a collateral. For all these reasons, we can have a situation with not necessarily low private returns, in fact, could be high private returns, but still no investment because there are no funding for this investment. But asymmetric information also operate in a different aspect, which is about the asymmetric information regarding the knowledge about available technologies. Everyone knows that the most traditional diffusion model, in which technology adoption results from the spread of information about technology, highlights the fact that diffusion is not automatic and that there is asymmetric information regarding the knowledge about which the technologies are available to be used. So, if these are the two most important market failures that affect private investment in innovation, and that is the reason why we have the gap between social returns and private returns, we need to know whether the investment, whether the policy intervention have worked or not. And what we have learned from the impact evaluations of IDB supported public interventions. One typical intervention supported by the bank over the years in many different countries have been the provision of R&D matching grants, or the financing of R&D matching grants programs. And the analysis of all the different impact evaluations that we have done regarding R&D matching grants programs is that matching grants do correct market failures, but intervention design is key. I'm going to focus on two of the most important or most recent and also most important impact evaluation that we have done at the bank regarding R&D matching grants programs. Which is the main rationale for R&D matching grants programs? The main rationale is the existence of knowledge spillovers. And the problem is that all the previous impact evaluations done on R&D matching grant programs are wrong. In our opinion, are basically wrong. And the reason is the following. Most of previous impact evaluation of innovation matching grants programs, both in Latin America and also in developed countries, have focused on their impact on the R&D investment and the productivity by direct beneficiaries. And we have there a long list of authors, including me, in several of the papers, that we have focused a lot on how R&D investments and productivity react after the policy intervention of the direct beneficiaries. However, we conclude that this approach is not informative enough to assess whether such subsidies have been justified or not. For example, a subsidy will not be justified if all the benefits from the R&D investment are concentrated in one firm. In such case, a traditional impact evaluation focusing on direct beneficiaries will indicate that the intervention increased investment and productivity, even if it failed to generate knowledge spillovers. Worse, in the absence of spillovers, the subsidy could lead to an increase in R&D investment in projects that are socially undesirable, but for which the private returns exceed private after subsidy cost. For example, a project with a private returns of $5, no spillovers, and a cost of $6. This is a not socially desirable project, but if 3 of these $6 are paid by the subsidy, the project will be carried out anyway. And then this investment will be even undesirable if there are spillovers, if the spillovers are small enough, for example, smaller than $1. So what I'm trying to tell here is that there is a wrong focus on the previous impact evaluations of R&D matching grants problems. Why? Because an R&D matching grants program tried to solve an spillover problem. So unless we measure if there are spillovers associated with the intervention, only looking at the investment response of the beneficiary, it doesn't tell us anything about if the project of the intervention is solving the market failure that it's supposed to solve. So look at two different different evaluations that try to look at the spillovers. The two main channels through which these spillovers might happen is labor mobility and geographical distance. One of the papers is the paper by my colleagues and friends, Castillo, Garone, Maffioli, Rojo, and Stuckey, of 2019. They studied the first channel of spillover for the case of the R&D matching grants provided by the FONTAR program for Argentina, which is supported by the IDB. What they did is the following: using the entire population of registered firms and employees between 1997 and 2013, and a sample of 670 firms supported by FONTAR, they examined the program's effects on: one, the performance of firms generating knowledge, so the firms that participated in the program and invested in innovation; second, their employees; and third, firms that hire employees from the original investors in innovation. And the results show that not only FONTAR direct beneficiaries increase productivity, for proxy in their paper by export, but that FONTAR's indirect beneficiaries, those firms that 2, 3, or 4 years later hire a high-skilled labor from a firm that participated in FONTAR, also increase productivity, survival, and exports. Each one with respect to their own control group. So it looks like there are spillovers. So these are the type of evidence that really allow us to sleep very well at night. The program intervention that we are supporting firms that are investing in innovation, and that innovation is generating spillovers, in this case, through labor mobility. What you have in these figures, in this slide, is, for example, how the productivity evolved after a firm that didn't participate in the program but received a high-skilled worker from a firm that participated in the program, increased productivity after hire this high-skilled worker. These results are controlled for changes in the skill composition of the workforce of the firm. So this is not an effect due to the fact that you are hiring a skilled worker from any source. You are hiring a skilled worker from a source related with FONTAR, because the other sources of hiring skilled workers are controlled for in these estimates. And what is important to see is that the effect is only when you hire a high-skilled worker, not when you hire a low-skilled worker. So it's more likely that it's when you hire a skilled worker that has been affected by the FONTAR project. So it seems that R&D matching grants are generating spillovers. So this is the type of first conclusion that we arrive after this impact evaluation. But the second conclusion is that different types of R&D projects might vary in their potential to generate spillovers. For instance, firms conducting intramural R&D, that is R&D activities that are developed within the firm, might find it easier to protect the knowledge generated internally. To explore this, together with other colleagues and friends from the IDB, we evaluate the direct and indirect spillover effects of Chilean FONTEC and FONDEF programs, which were also supported by the IDB during the 90s and 2000s on firm performance. Rather than focusing only on direct beneficiaries, we assessed the extent to which R&D matching grants have also affected untreated firms. That is the occurrence of spillover effects using an indicator of geographical and technological proximity between treated and untreated firms. The important thing of this paper is that we are working with two projects or two programs, FONTEC and FONDEF. And these two programs normally produce very different type of policy interventions. While FONTEC supports intramural R&D, FONDEF finances extramural R&D carried out in collaboration with research institutes. So we will have an ex ante expectation of which program is possibly generating more spillovers. We think that ex ante FONDEF, in the extent that is financing collaborative research between firms and public research organizations that produce more generic knowledge, might be more prone to generate spillover than the FONTEC supported projects. So to identify these effects, in the paper we compute firm level total factor productivity, and we apply fixed effects techniques to a data set that merged several waves of the Chile's National Manufacturing Service collected by the National Institute of Statistics, with registered data coming from information on beneficiaries of both programs. Geographical spillovers are defined as the share of firms that are treated by each program in the same sector and region. And so, what we learned from this impact evaluation? The findings show that R&D matching grants in Chile do generate spillover effects. So we put together all the programs and we have just one single treatment. We found that this single treatment, independently from the program that is underlying the treatment, one single treatment generate spillovers. But when we separate this single treatment in these two programs, FONTEC and FONDEF, we found the following. Directly participation in an R&D support program, either FONTEC or FONDEF, increase firms' total factor productivity, in both cases by around 4%. So the direct effects of two programs on direct beneficiaries is about the same, around 4%. However, in terms of spillovers, one standard deviation increase in the share of supported firms in the same region and sector increases TFP of firms that are close, but around 1%, but that did not participate in the program, in any of the programs. However, all the effects, when we look at each program separately, the direct effect remains quite similar. However, the results suggest that spillover effects are contingent on program design because only FONDEF-funded projects, extramural R&D, generate positive spillovers. So when we just separate the treatment into two programs, direct effects are the same, but when you have the two shares of firms receiving support, only the share of firms receiving support from FONDEF has a positive effect on the productivity of firms that did not participate in either in FONDEF or FONTEC. So it looks like it's only the collaborative research design, the one that generates spillovers. When you look at the spillover effects even more deeply, what we found is because you have a share and you have the amount of the effect of the share of the share of beneficiaries on non-treated firms, and you can see the effect that has on TFP. You can work with the share, move the share from 0 to 1, and to see the effect that share, that the spillover have on TFP. And then when we did that, we found that there is an inverted U relationship between the intensity of the support captured by the share of firms receiving R&D subsidies in the same sector and location, and the spillover effects on productivity. And our interpretation is that this inverted U relationship is due to the working of two effects. One effect is the typical knowledge spillover effect. And we can assume that the typical knowledge spillover effect has a decrease in return. So you learn a lot from your first competitor that adopt a technology. You learn a little bit less from the second, a little bit less from the third, and you don't learn anything more from the fourth, fifth, and sixth. So there is a decrease in return in the knowledge spillover effect. But there is also what Bloom, Van Rijn, etc. call a business stealing effect. In fact, that in order to gain a return from innovation, you need to have some market from where that return can be profited. If your market is declining because you are not adopting a technology and the other ones are adopting a technology, so while the share of the companies adopting the technology or being supported in this case is increasing, and the share of companies is not decreased, the share of the companies of not adopting the technology is, on the other hand, decreasing, your share of the market is reducing. And if your share of the market is reducing, it's no longer beneficial for you to invest in technology and to increase TFP. So we can assume that increasing the share of rivals that are being supported produces business stealing effect that increases when the share of treated neighbors also increase. So the result is that when you combine the two effects, you will have the U-turn effects. But in terms of practical implications, one important message of this paper is that we have to be careful with too little or too large interventions. So too large interventions are not basically going to generate spillovers because everyone is getting the program. And too little interventions neither are going to generate spillovers because there are too few cases to learn from. And this is an important implication because in Latin America, we talk about doing innovation policies, but we actually do what we are doing by innovation policies is all pilot programs. We have a pilotitis illness in our policymakers. We do programs that are too small to basically have any impact overall in society. So we have from these two very recent papers, three important, I believe, policy implications. The first is that matching grants might be a valid policy tool to promote knowledge creation and increase productivity. So it looks like they are funding projects that generate spillovers. That's good news. Second, innovation policy designs that encourage research collaboration among different actors, particularly firms and universities or technological institutes, should be preferred over those that simply subsidize intramural R&D. This has a strong implication on using too much or putting too much expectations, for example, on fiscal instruments like R&D tax credits or so on that focus on basically subsidizing only intramural R&D. And third, that spillover have non-linear effects on productivity. This has another important implication for policy designs, that subsidies should be focused on supporting, in particular, early adopter of technology. So supporting the pioneers, not the followers. Our second lesson that we're going to show with more detail in the book, I'm going just to give a very, very short introduction here in this presentation is that credit might increase private investment in innovation. If your focus is not solving the spillovers market failures, is solving the asymmetric information market failure, credit might be a preferred solution over subsidies. We know that liquidity constraints hinder private investment in innovation, and over time, several public programs have started providing credit lines and guarantees for firm-level innovation. And a couple of colleagues, Vinelli and Maffioli, carry out one of the most comprehensive assessments of the impact of a credit program on innovation. More specifically, they evaluate the impact of the innovation credit line financed by Fontar on firms' decision to invest in innovation. And additionally, they compare the impacts of innovation credit lines with those of subsidies, either direct subsidies or tax credits. The estimation strategy that they use is based on a difference in difference firm-level investment model, where the main dependent variable is the log total private net of subsidies investment in innovation. So you can see there is a crowding in or crowding out effects. And the main results suggest that 1% increase in the amount financed through the program yields a 0.15% increase in privately financed R&D. And the impacts are similar when using either credit or subsidies. In this scenario, it's better to use credit-based intervention, in the extent that these are reversible mechanisms that reduce the fiscal cost of the policy, enhance the sustainability of the implementing organization, and reduce the likelihood of crowding out effects. So it's in the extent that both policy interventions produce the same reaction in the investment, which is to think that there is affected by liquidity constraint, it's better to use credit and not subsidies, because you get the money back, at least part of the money back. And then you can use that money for rolling over more policy interventions. Something that you don't do is you just give the companies a plain subsidy. And finally, our first lesson is that technology extension programs do close knowledge gaps of SMEs. Castillo, Maffioli, Garoni, and Ochaco, other friends, evaluate a program called PAC in Argentina. The main objective of the PAC is to finance through non-reimbursable vouchers, technical assistance projects to develop SMEs' capacities and competitiveness. In total, they supported something like 4,300 SMEs in the period 2010-2014. That was also supported by the IDB. And the focus of the support was quality certification, marketing, and organizational change services. The control group is taken from the Social Protection Business Register developed by the Observatory of Employment and Business Dynamics, the Ministry of Labor. And they use a propensity score matching and difference in difference combined for the evaluation. The results find a positive and significant impact of the program, of the extension program on employment. Growth of between 5 and 18%, export probability between 1.4 and 2.5%, export 6.193%, survival 1.3, 1.6%, and productivity between 0.6 and 1.8%. However, the results vary a lot depending on the type of technical assistance received. All services had a positive and significant effect on survival and employment, but only quality certification services show consistent positive impacts on export and average wages. So depending which is your policy goal for the SMEs, it looks like the type of technical assistance provided to the company will have different results. But one important result that we found in the paper is that program additionality in terms of the impacts shown above in the slide is strongly related with the first support provided by the PAC, but not with further participation in the program. In the case of first, with repeated attendance. So if the company goes to the program the first time, easily reach those impacts. But if she repeats 1, 2, 3 times, the increase in terms of impact, the marginal increase in terms of impacts is basically 0. And we think that this finding, the fact that all the impacts are concentrated in the first intervention, is consistent with the hypothesis that the programs allows solving information problems between technical assistance suppliers as SMEs. It's not too much about learning. It's about learning to work with whom, basically. So this had also a very important policy implication in the extent that the new programs of extension services to SMEs make a special requirement to the governments that are going to implement the programs that they focus only the assistance on first users of the programs. So we are where we are now. So we think we are quite, I would say, happy that we have managed to move the agenda forward in several dimensions of impact evaluations, but there are many things that still to be learned. So I would like to close the presentation with some ideas about new avenues of impact evaluation of business innovation programs that we are working at the moment, but the results are not still there yet. We know that impact evaluations are, for us, the most important means to produce knowledge with direct policy implications. But many gaps remain, and these gaps are regarding the following questions. There is a question about heterogeneity, if the effects are different, not that much among different treatments, but at different categories of beneficiaries, and sometimes we suffer from problem of sample size on the treatment population, on the treated population, on the treated group, to go forward and to have a closer analysis of how heterogeneous the results are according to the different beneficiaries. Second, the dosage effects, marginal effects, all the analysis that I have showed in the previous slides is in the idea, based on the idea that the company has participated and received a grant. But companies receive not only a grant, receive different amounts of grants. And having a variation, a different amount of grants can give an idea if there is if the intensity of the treatment also matters. Maybe you can give the companies a little bit of grants, not 100% of the grant, and that will make overall the difference. So we need to explore this with more detail. Third, which is my favorite one, which is the multi-treatment effect. We know that there are different programs going on at the same time. So it will be nice to see two things here, to learn a little bit more about two things here. One is the effects of the different programs. If they are combined, are different if the programs are provided to the company in an isolated way. That's a question. And maybe that's not the most important question. The most important question for me is what is the sequence of the intervention? When you have two programs given to the company, the issue is not that much about giving the company the two programs, because it's very difficult that you're going to give the company the two programs at the same time. The issue, the real issue, the really important issue is which program is going to give to the company first and which program is going to give to the company second. With Roberto, in the previous paper that I think we never finished, but it's still going on, we did this trying to compare the effects of two programs, export promotion programs and innovation programs in companies, and we look at with the sequence of the intervention, and we found that the sequence is innovation first, export promotion later, and not the other way around. But this is something that I hope, Roberto, that at some point we are going to finish. And fourth, I mean, there are quite a lot of experimentation going on in terms of policy intervention. So it's not that we are still doing the same matching grant intervention that we were doing 20 years ago. Things are evolving. New policy intervention have been, new market failures have emerged, and new policy intervention have also been proposed to tackle these market failures. So, for example, new policy tools, the way how innovation is being done has changed. So we are moving from a model of in-house innovation to a model of open innovation. This dual open innovation model is mainly done because the increased complexity of the innovation process, but also because the speed of the innovation process. Open innovation also have different market failures than, let's say, in-house innovation or internal innovation or closed innovation. So different interventions have been put forward to deal with open innovation programs, and many of them are already being implemented. When you move open innovation to the public sector, which is the collaboration between innovative firms and the government that is using that technologies, you have public procurement of innovation. So there are already in the field, most in Europe, but increasingly in Latin America, some measures that try to deploy a public procurement of innovation program. So how you are going to evaluate that? Which is, you need to be very clear about the market failure that is going to solve, which is a coordination market failure. It's not a spillover market failure. It's not a liquidity constraint market failure. So we need to be very sure about which are going to be your metrics to measure the impact of those programs and the way how you're going to do it. Because, for example, in the case of public procurement, in all these programs, but it's clear in the case of public procurement of innovation, you have two sides. You have the supplier of the technology and you have the user of the technology. So an impact evaluation requires you to look at what's going on with the supplier of the technology, how the solving of the coordination failure between supply and demand of knowledge affect the supplier of knowledge, which is what normally is the one we evaluate in different previous interventions, but also now the user of the knowledge. So if a hospital, for example, is buying new technology from suppliers, how is it going to affect first the supplier of the technology, but also the patients that go to that hospital for the different treatments, for example, the treatment, the health treatment, not the econometric treatments. So the examples before, I think, are just first step in answering this question. So we have done in this summary, in this synthesis, in this chapter that's going to be in the book, publishing next year, are just some examples of the way how at the IDB we are trying to tackle some of these issues. But not even the issues that we have tackled are completely being tackled. And there are many other issues that are still left open. And it's a challenge for all of you in this conference to move forward with this impact evaluation agenda. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Gustavo. Una presentación excelente resumiendo un montón de trabajo que ustedes en la vida han hecho, y otros investigadores de la región también, creo que con implicancias muy importantes desde el punto de vista de la política pública y con los desafíos que debemos enfrentar para poder ir mejorando el impacto de estas pseudopolíticas. Muchísimas gracias, un magnífico resumen. Entonces nos vamos a mover ahora a las preguntas que ustedes pueden ir haciendo en el preguntas y respuestas. Así que, Simone Sasso, primera pregunta. Voy a hacerlas en inglés porque está en inglés, así que. Just wondering on the possible external validity of this finding for Latin America and the Caribbean, to which extent the findings presented for Argentina and Chile may be applied also to other Latin American countries with much weaker innovation systems. Any others IAs that could give some hints and insight on this This is a question by Simone Sasso from the IDB.
Can I answer?
Yeah, you can answer the question.
Well, hi, Simone. It depends. It depends on the treatment and it depends on the country. I assume that our findings regarding spillovers on R&D matching grants are not valid for all the countries in the region. Obviously, they are valid for a subgroup of countries that have R&D capacities with some minimum level of development, like Argentina, Chile, Brazil. Actually, there are a couple of studies looking at spillovers in Brazil. I didn't mention them because in the paper we are only focusing on impact evaluation that we have done. In Brazil, these have been done by other researchers, but it's also a nice paper. And also it can be also extended to Brazil or maybe perhaps Mexico. But there are other results that I show that I think are valid for countries with weaker innovation system. Like, for example, that credit might be a good vehicle for helping technology adoption, or that technology extension programs are being effective in order to help SMEs, for example. So it depends. It depends on the treatment and it depends on the country.
¿Alguna otra pregunta que quieran hacer? ¿Comentarios? Por mientras tenemos una pregunta, voy a aprovechar mi rol de moderador también para un poco nutrirme de tu experiencia durante estos años. ¿Cuál crees tú que son las principales barreras, dificultades que desde el punto de vista del impacto uno pudiese relevar y decir, mira, estas son barreras importantes que limitan el impacto de la política de sector público? Porque uno puede, tú decías, nos vamos tranquilos a dormirse por las noches cuando encontramos que estas políticas tienen impacto, pero también hay varios estudios que muestran que a pesar de estas políticas, de los instrumentos, el impacto es relativamente moderado y aún somos una región con un pobre desempeño en temas de productividad, innovación, y uno podría ver, también analizar desde ese punto de vista, qué tipo de como barreras, obstáculos impiden un mayor impacto de estas políticas. ¿Cuáles son?
Ahora sí, hay varias. Yo creo que, y es un tema más amplio que no lo estamos abordando con las evaluaciones de impacto. Yo creo que una de las razones por las cuales los impactos son pequeños, y como tú dices, Roberto, estas intervenciones en un ámbito reducido funcionan, pero no mueven la aguja en la economía nacional, es por uno de los resultados que yo mostré. Son demasiado chiquitas, son demasiado limitadas. Pero también hay otros ámbitos que tienen que ver también con el policy mix y cómo ese policy mix está balanceado. Yo analizo y vemos que dentro de el grueso de los recursos que uno gasta en public policy en muchos países de la región, buena parte se invierte en apoyo de programas de matching grants, por ejemplo, y es muy poquito lo que se invierte en programas de extensionismo, cuando probablemente debería ser al revés, ¿no? Porque el grueso de tus problemas en la región está precisamente en las SMEs. Entonces tenemos distintos problemas, programas chicos, programas policy mix que no está bien enfocado, y después tenemos también problemas de diseño, ¿no? Es decir, estos resultados te siguen diciendo hay que promover programas colaborativos, pero el grueso de los programas sigue siendo intramural R&D. Entonces hay un conjunto de factores que hacen que cuando esto se extiende a la macro de la política de innovación, los efectos son muy limitados, a lo cual le agregaría incapacidades o limitadas capacidades de los organismos que implementan estas políticas, ¿no es cierto? De que seamos realistas, si una agencia de innovación hace un concurso para un matching grant y se demora un año en responderle a la empresa va a recibir el matching grant, sin lugar a dudas. pero es para hacer otro proyecto, no el proyecto que postuló la agencia, porque pasó demasiado tiempo. Entonces, hay también ese tipo, hay múltiples factores que hacen que hay que obviamente, que hay que trabajarlos, ¿no es cierto? Que hay que trabajarlos. Creo que Pierre, he wants to make a question.
Yes, hello, Gustavo.
Hi, Pierre. Hi, Pierre. Nice to see you.
Hello. Thank you. Same way. I have a question. I found it quite interesting what you said about giving grants to firms that are close to each other, geographically or technologically. That's something that you should avoid to do. But now the question is, which ones are you going to choose? You said you should give grants to the leaders and not to the laggards. I guess another way of saying it, you want to give grants to those that have the highest spillovers. But ex ante, how do you decide? How can you find out where the spillovers are highest ex ante? It's already difficult ex post, but ex ante, how would you do this?
And I think that, I mean, in my interpretation, if you're going to provide the grant to a company, it's because you want to be sure that the company is going to produce spillovers. So in that case, it's better to focus on a pioneer company and not in a follower company, because it's from the pioneer company that the followers are going to learn from. So followers are not going to learn from followers. Followers are going to learn from pioneers. So you need to partner with a pioneer. The second part of your question is how to identify the pioneer. And this is something very difficult to do, actually. But I think with an analysis of best practice, at the moment that the company submit a proposal for a project, it's very, very important to make an analysis of best practice frontier in that particular sector to be sure that the company is really a pioneer. In many cases, this is not something done. So innovation aid, we see, for example, in the region, I'm not sure in Europe, but we see in the region that there is a very little interaction between innovation agencies that provide grants and the intellectual property offices. Very little, it's surprising for me. And the few that work a little bit better are the ones that they have interaction. So they receive a proposal, the first thing that they do is they send the proposal to the intellectual property office, ask the office, look, this is something really new, or is something really new, at least for my market. So this is the first necessary condition to be a pioneer, to be sure that what you are proposing has not already been available, at least in your market. This is an important thing for Latin America, because at the beginning, when we started supporting innovation at the IDB, let's say about early 90s, we use a lot of technical cooperation for ourselves from developed countries. And in developed countries, the novelty level is the world level. So our first programs put the world level bar also in Latin America, and we never managed to execute any single grant because companies are very far. So we changed that, we adopted that to an innovative level, which is a level to the market, to the national market. So we opened the possibility of a pioneer to look at what is going on abroad in your sector, bring the technology and adapt the technology to your reality by being the first in doing that. So we try to focus, and the other thing that we look at is the capacity of the firm, if the firm has human resources, if the firm is going to carry out that research in collaboration with public research institutes. So these are the types of features that you believe ex ante that can later on trigger spillovers.
Muchas gracias, Gustavo. Tengo un par de preguntas más acá de Mónica Salazar respecto a lo que mencionaste al pasar sobre los programas de apoyo a clústeres. Si existen evaluaciones al respecto, si puedes comentar un poquitito sobre los resultados. Estás muteado, Gustavo.
hay evaluaciones de programas de clusters, sobre todo programas de clusters en países grandes, en Argentina o Brasil. Ahí, digamos, uno tiene que ser muy cuidadoso. Es complicado hacer una evaluación de un programa de clúster porque normalmente lo que los programas de clúster tratan de financiar es la existencia de algún tipo de bien público de tipo club, ¿no? Un bien público para las empresas del clúster, sea un centro tecnológico, una marca comercial. Me acuerdo las naranjas de Colchagua, que yo no sé, una cosa por el estilo. Ese tipo de cosas que por definición benefician a todas las empresas del clúster. Entonces, yo agarro empresas que, por ejemplo, participaron en el programa activamente y le digo, este es mi tratamiento, y luego las comparo con empresas de control, que son empresas que fueron parte del clúster, pero que no participaron. Si realmente el programa de clúster financió un bien público sectorial, estas también se beneficiaron. Entonces me va a dar que a lo mejor el programa de clúster fue tremendamente exitoso y el resultado fue 0, porque precisamente el grupo de control está fuertemente contaminado. Entonces, es un desafío importante, y lo que se ha hecho muchas veces es comparar clúster con clústeres. Y ahí hemos usado, inclusive en el caso de Uruguay, recuerdo ahora un programa en el caso de Argentina también, en ambos casos un programa de clúster de apoyo al turismo, por ejemplo, donde lo que hicimos fue comparar el programa de clúster que apoyó el turismo de una determinada región comparado con un control sintético de cómo se comportaba el clúster de turismo en una región que era un promedio ponderado de las otras regiones del país donde no participaron donde no hubo apoyo al clúster de turismo, pero construido ese ponderado de forma tal que se comportasen ex ante del tratamiento igual al clúster de turismo apoyado. Y ahí es donde aparecen algunos efectos muy interesantes.
Gracias, Gustavo. Tengo otra pregunta de Jorge Vélez. Me voy a cambiar al inglés ahora, al traductor. In evaluating the effectiveness of R&D subsidies, the literature so far has completely neglected the possibility of misappropriation of public funds. To what extent you see this problem when evaluating the causal effect of R&D subsidies on R&D expenditure, when monitoring is weak and misappropriation takes place due to moral hazard behavior?
Well, I think that most of the previous impact evaluations, the ones that I believe are not very informative because they look at the effect on investment. And there are a subgroup of those interventions that look at the effects of investment net of subsidies, which is if there are crowding in or crowding out effects. And most of the results tend to suggest, or at least a proportion in about 2/3 to 1/3, tends to suggest that there is a crowding in effect. I will be very concerned if of your misappropriation problem if there is a massive crowding out effect, for example. But the fact that there is crowding in effect suggests me that maybe this is a problem, but it's not a problem which is that important. The second thing that you can control is you can analyze, or you can try to implement to mitigate the problem is about the way how you design the specific mechanism through which you deliver the support. In many cases, and in cases in almost all Latin American countries, the support provided to the companies is work as a reimbursement. So the company present a project, you look at the project, you look at the cost of the project, you look at what are the different cost lines of the project, and you say to the company, okay, these are the things that you're going to spend. These are the things that I'm going to subsidize to you. These are the things that you are going to pay with your own money, but go pay for 100%, bring me back your receipt, and I'm going to reimburse a proportion of that. So this reimbursement mechanism is much more safer in terms of to avoid misappropriation, because you can actually see what the company is doing with the money.
Muy bien, muchas gracias, Gustavo. ¿Alguna otra pregunta? ¿Alguien que quiera hacerlo vía question and answer o directamente, si los que puedan, respecto de este tema tan interesante y que nos preocupa tanto, que es acerca del impacto que tienen los distintos programas? Acá tengo una de Juan Sebastián Balbuena, que dice así: los programas de desarrollo económico en las ciudades no tienen en cuenta o no son asertivos los instrumentos que usan para potenciar la innovación empresarial. El orden de las inversiones de programas que apuntan a mejorar las exportaciones no tienen en cuenta la innovación. ¿Cómo articular esa necesidad de mejorar índices de exportación cuando no hay empresas innovadoras? Algo tú mencionaste al pasar con estos programas, que veíamos si era primero el programa de innovación o el hecho de exportar, promover las exportaciones. Hay un tema bien interesante ahí que creo que se relaciona bastante con lo que pregunta Juan Sebastián.
Sí, correcto. Muy brevemente, es porque uno, digamos, tiene que pensar que existen en el mundo múltiples market failures y por lo tanto necesitan múltiples programas para resolver esas market failures. Y que si uno resuelve una de esas market failures, no necesariamente tiene efecto, sino es que resuelve también la otra. Por ejemplo, en el caso de las exportaciones de innovación, tú tienes dos market failures. Por el lado del market failure de las exportaciones, que es el tema de los searching spillovers, tú tienes que ir y ver si efectivamente existe mercado para tu producto, pero también tienes las knowledge spillovers, que son las que están asociadas con el proceso de generación de conocimiento para la innovación. Si tú tienes un programa de exportación, un programa de fomento que cubre las searching spillovers, que son los programas de promoción de exportaciones, pero no estás resolviendo el problema de los otros spillovers, va a tener muy poca innovación y muy pocas exportaciones. Y si estás resolviendo el problema de los spillovers de innovación, pero no estás resolviendo el problema de la searching spillover de las exportaciones, te va a pasar lo mismo. Entonces es importante que en el mundo real, que operan múltiples fallas, se combinen y se integren estos programas. Lo cual además tiene un desafío de diseño institucional, ¿no? Porque normalmente las agencias que tienen que ver con la promoción de exportaciones, las que tienen que ver con la promoción de la innovación, hablan como si fuesen mundos diferentes, ¿no es cierto? Y entonces lograr que trabajen juntas también es un problema. Y ni hablar con las que promueven la innovación, con las que trabajan, que promueven la investigación científica, ¿no es cierto? Eso también es otro problema. Entonces hay un tema superior al programa, que es el diseño institucional que provee la articulación.
Doctor Roberto, tienes el micrófono muteado.
¿Alguien más que tenga alguna pregunta? Tenemos unos minutos más. Aprovechemos a Gustavo ahí, que siempre está muy ocupado y su experiencia en estos años ha sido bastante grande, así que yo creo que hay que sacarle el jugo siempre a Crespi. ¿Alguien más?
Hola Roberto, ¿qué tal? Fernando por acá, aprovechando de hacer una pregunta.
Hola Fernando.
In-house. Una de las cosas que no he visto todavía en la literatura y que quizás complementario a la presentación que ha hecho Gustavo es si es que existe algún tipo de intervención o esperanza en que uno pueda incentivar a empresas, digamos, los incumbentes, a pasar de ser empresas que no hacen innovación o hacen innovación, digamos, no muy sofisticada, a empresas que hacen I+D de manera permanente y que por lo tanto permitan aumentar el pool de empresas que se pueden beneficiar de spillovers. ¿Conocemos en el fondo de evidencia en esa dirección de programas que tengan esta capacidad de transformar empresas en su core de negocio? Digo, lo pienso como que la alternativa sería lo que necesitamos entonces son nuevas empresas solamente que desde un origen sean basadas en I+D.
No, yo creo que hay que balancear cuánto es del incumbente y cuánto es del nuevo, y el balance depende mucho de los países. Hay países que tienen una estructura productiva muy concentrada en sectores muy tradicionales, muy basados, por ejemplo, en recursos naturales, en algunos casos. Y en esos casos son sectores que son low innovation intensive sectors en cualquier parte del mundo. Y muchas veces transformar esos sectores, si no lo han transformado en los países de frontera, probablemente tampoco lo volvemos a transformar nosotros. Y en ese caso sí es importante renovar la estructura productiva y el apoyo al emprendimiento y el surgimiento de empresas de base tecnológica y el fortalecimiento de la infraestructura científico-tecnológica para eso puede llegar a ser muy importante para esos países. Pero hay otros países que tienen una estructura productiva más compleja y ahí es donde los incumbents pueden tener un rol importante. Ahora, un problema con los incumbents es que los incumbents quieren realmente innovar. Y eso depende de otros factores, de otras cosas a las que yo no hice referencia en el paper, pero en algunos casos estamos mirando, o hemos mirado recientemente. El colega José Miguel Benavente ha desarrollado un proyecto de investigación al respecto, que es ver, por ejemplo, qué pasa con el régimen de competencia. Sabemos, digamos, que las empresas innovan en la medida que existe efectos escape of competition, ¿no? Las empresas innovan cuando la competencia la amenaza y por lo tanto tratan de escapar de esa competencia para buscar un producto nuevo. Pero si los mercados nuestros son muy poco competitivos, una cosa que ya dijo Arrow mucho tiempo atrás es que un monopolio nunca se desplaza a sí mismo, digamos. Entonces, ese puede ser otro factor. El fortalecimiento de las políticas de competencia puede ser un factor gatillador de la innovación en las empresas incumbentes, creo yo, mucho más fuerte que los instrumentos directos de política de innovación.
Muy bien, muchas gracias. ¿Alguien más? Un espacio para la última pregunta. ¿Algún comentario? El mismo Gustavo, si quieres cerrar con algo, alguna reflexión final luego de esta discusión, de esta conversación.
No, simplemente que lo que he planteado es una agenda de trabajo, que, como Roberto sabe muy bien, esta es una agenda que se va haciendo muchas veces sobre la marcha, o sea, vamos aprendiendo cosas que nos llevan a otras preguntas que queremos después contestar, y que por lo tanto no tiene una fecha de cierre concreta, digamos. Puede tener milestones en el corto plazo, pero es una agenda permanente y que del banco vamos a seguir empujando. Y bueno, contamos con la participación de todos ustedes y la ayuda de todos ustedes en avanzar en ese proceso. Ahora, por ejemplo, estamos analizando con Fernando un proyecto y contigo también, Roberto, un proyecto sobre cómo el régimen tributario en los países está afectando o no la decisión de invertir en innovación, y está saliendo unos resultados importantes. Entonces, creo que también mirar, aparte de los programas específicos, mirar cómo las condiciones de contexto, las tributarias, las de política de competencia, lo que se conoce como clima de negocios está afectando a los países nuestros, también puede ser muy relevante. Y bueno, contamos con el apoyo, con la ayuda de todos ustedes desde ya. Muchas gracias. Y cualquier otra consulta por email me la pueden hacer. Si quieres compartir en la red de email, no hay problema.
Buenísimo, muchísimas gracias. Muy excelente presentación, excelente discusión. También agradecer de nuevo a los organizadores por permitirme estar acá hoy y moderar esta sesión, y los dejo. Muchas gracias, muy agradecido. Un gusto haberlos visto y haber conversado con muchos de ustedes, con los cuales nos unen años de investigación en estos temas y también lazos de amistad que siguen ahí. Así que, Laura, te dejo a ti para el cierre. Abrazo, Gustavo.
Muchísimas gracias a los doctores Roberto y Gustavo por su intervención. Creo que podríamos dejar de pronto el correo del doctor Gustavo en el chat para las personas que quieran hacerle sus consultas posteriormente. Bien, con esta charla damos por finalizada la agenda del día 2 en la cuarta conferencia de la Red de Economía de la Innovación y el Emprendimiento de América Latina y el Caribe, RIE. No olviden que mañana iniciaremos a las 10 de la mañana en la sala principal, con la conferencia sobre incentivos tributarios e innovación. Para conectarse, solo deben hacer clic en el link que encuentran en la agenda oficial del evento. Gracias a todos y feliz día.